This is our maiden voyage of an open line internet, and we've been doing town hall meetings where we've called most of the homes in the district and in other homes outside the district into the new 4th district. Of course, it's a result of the redistricting that's taken place, and had an opportunity to hear from you while you sat in your living room over the telephone. But as new technology advances and town hall calls with a live interchange like we've had over the last couple of years, it's relatively new technology. This is another component of new technology, and it's a live stream over the internet. So I'm sitting in my office in Washington, D.C. right now, and I'd like to be able to take calls and respond just like a town hall meeting, but the problem with that is that because of the interactivity, there's a delay, and so we've asked you to send in your questions over the internet. We're going to spend an hour, and I'm going to do my best to get you answers for those of you who have sent the questions in. And we don't know how many people will be on, but just imagine that there are people on the internet all over the district, all over the state, and really in different places all across the country that are likely tapped into this. And we're going to get better, but maybe we'll pull it off perfectly the first time. Don't think so either. So what I have in my hand here are about 20 questions that have been sent to me over the internet. And if you have questions in a timely way you'd like to send to the internet address, we're going to try to monitor that. And if there's a way to get a question in that you've asked that's been stimulated by this discussion, I'm watching Tommy nod his head, which means he'll watch to see if you sent an email in. We'll try to lift that up and get it printed and get it to my hand. But I'd start out first in these list of 20 or so questions. And this question is from Mark. And I should point out also, I've not reviewed these questions. This is as if they're coming spontaneously out of the crowd, because I just wanted it to be real, and I didn't want to prepare for this. So first question is from Mark, and it reads this way. Starting August 15th, illegal immigrants who come to the United States when they are under 16 years, and are 30 years or younger, have lived here more than 5 years, are in school, or graduated, or serve in the military, can get temporary work permits. We have millions of our own citizens out of work. What can you do about this injustice? This is also against the law! Exclamation point. Thank you, Mark. It is against the law. Congress passes the immigration laws. Previous presidents have signed the immigration laws. And the President of the United States has taken it upon himself to step into the arena that was reserved for the United States Congress. That's Article 1 that says all laws have to be passed by Congress. And the President of the United States and the officers that within the executive branch of government are compelled to take an oath. And in that oath, it is in the Constitution that supports, their oath supports the oath in the Constitution that says to the President, he shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed. Now, the President has taken care instead, taken upon himself to be a super legislature himself. He has gone well beyond this. He's suspended the No Child Left Behind Act for certain states, granted them waivers. The President has declared the Senate to be out of session when they were gavelled in session in order to make recess appointments. The President has legislated by press conference in declaring that the Catholic Church and other religious organizations, first of all, by rule, would be compelled to provide birth control pills, contraceptives, and abortifacients, all against their will and against their religious convictions. And when he found out that was a bad political decision, he did a press conference and decided to legislate at the press conference and say, now I'm going to make an accommodation to the religious organizations, and I'm going to require the insurance companies to provide these things for free. Nothing changed in the rule, nothing changed in the law. The only thing that changed was the President's words at a press conference. And now he has taken on with utter audacity and declared that he can write immigration law out of thin air. So this provisions, what some call Dream Act Light, set up 4 classes of people. Those classes of people all fit within this category in your question, Mark. And that is that they have to have come into the United States before they were 16, still be under the age of 30, having either been in school, graduated from high school, received a GED, or receive an honorable discharge from the military. Those are the 4 classes of people, and any of them would be exempt from the enforcement of immigration law and deportation, provided that they weren't a convicted felon or been convicted of a serious misdemeanor or a string of misdemeanors, apparently, that would embarrass the administration. And he orders U.S. Citizenship Immigration Services to produce a work permit so that they can work in the United States. That work permit doesn't exist in the federal code. What can we do about it is your question. And what we can do is do what I'm doing. I've sat in this office and planned and just had a discussion before we went on live stream here that I am bringing a lawsuit against the President of the United States. We have the best constitutional lawyers lined up to work this litigation. All of them agree that if we can get the case heard on the merits, that the courts will side with us and preserve the Article I powers of legislation for Congress, not for the President of the United States. I have significant experience in this, having sued then Governor Vilsack over a very similar issue when he attempted to legislate by executive order. And then the lawyers told me that I didn't understand that it was constitutional, but when I got it to court, and thanks to all the people that signed on as plaintiffs, especially in the Iowa House and the Iowa Senate, but when I got it to court, the court sided with me. In the case of King versus Vilsack is in the books. The court vacated the executive order of Tom Vilsack because he had reached outside his constitutional authority and issued an unconstitutional executive order. Well, the President of the United States has done the same thing. Through Janet Napolitano's memorandum, issued an unconstitutional executive edict, I will call it, and I believe that we will be filing suit against the President sometime in perhaps less than a month. And getting it into court is one of the things we can do to preserve and protect the Constitution and the rule of law. Aside from that, about the only other alternative is the election, to elect a new president that will respect their oath of office, keep it, and this president is a lawless president. And I'd be real happy to debate Christy Vilsack on that point. I hope that does answer the question, Mark. Thanks for sending it in. Now, this next question that I haven't seen either is a question from William in Sioux City. And William, your question reads this way. As a representative of Iowa who has thrown himself into the Missouri River flood issues of 2011, I ask you, do you, Representative King, support the continued waste of millions of taxpayer revenues to support the ACE management of the Missouri River for navigation in your home state? How do you justify spending millions upon millions of taxpayer dollars for an industry that simply does not exist in your home state on the Missouri River? Well, William, first I would say that there hasn't been a barge go up to Sioux City and drop off a cargo, to my knowledge, since 2004. The work that's done in the Missouri River is more flood control than it is barge management. I want to see flow in the river so we can use that river for all of its intended purposes. And those intended purposes at this point do include navigation, but it takes water to do that. And we have to have water to cool our generators, and we need to have the protection for flood. But my focus on this Missouri River has not been the few dollars that have been spent to keep the transportation lanes open in the Missouri River. That has been utterly minimal. The dollars that have been increased in order to create habitat are at least 10 times that of the money that's been spent to keep the channel open. I don't object to all of that. I do object to some of it. But the river system has been built to protect us from serious downstream flooding. That's the PIC Sloan program. That's the 6 dams in the upper Missouri that start up in Montana. We have that system built to protect us from serious downstream flooding. It needs to be readjusted so it continues to protect us from serious downstream flooding. I've made that case, I think, pretty deeply and effectively. The legislation that I've introduced is H.R. 2942, and it directs the Corps of Engineers to recalculate the storage necessary to protect us from serious downstream flooding. They have been using 1881 as the greatest runoff experience, and that's been the metric for the volume of storage that they have to protect us from flooding. I only direct them to recalculate for the greatest runoff ever. That now is 2011, but truthfully, if we got a greater flood in a subsequent year, they'd be required under my legislation to make another adjustment. I think that's a prudent thing to do with the system, and if you can't use the system to protect us from serious downstream flooding, then it's pretty hard to justify the system at all. But the transportation side of this thing, as I read this, is a very minimal part of the overall piece. And I would like if you'd send an email back and give me your recommendations on how you'd like to see those funds spent. I'd like to see that, and I think it'd be constructive for both of us to go through that exercise. This one, I don't think there is a Meadows. It says Meadows, so I don't know that somebody's sitting in their meadow sending an email out. It doesn't say the town, but I think I might know who's asked this question. And here's what it reads. Why is the USDA supporting Meatless Mondays when they are supposed to be helping livestock farmers? Whew. There's no rationale to that. Yesterday we got the news that the U.S. Department of Agriculture has on their website, or had on their website more appropriately, a Meatless Mondays advocacy that they're at the headquarters of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, run by Tom Vilsack, that they would, their policy would be no meat at the USDA on Monday. Now that is just appalling to me. It's heresy to think that the USDA, that's in the business of promoting agriculture, should be taking care of our markets, promoting export of meat to foreign countries. How does that hurt our ability to export, to market and sell beef in this country and in foreign countries? How much does it hurt our pork producers, our beef producers, our poultry producers, our lamb producers in this country when you've got the USDA advocating that people should take a day off from eating meat? It is appalling. And when I declared it in a tweet that I sent out yesterday, it's heresy. That I will not graze at the U.S. Department of Agriculture on Mondays, but what I'll do is dedicate Mondays to double ribeye Mondays is what we'll do here instead. And they pulled down the piece on the website that called for Meatless Mondays at the USDA. The point remains, you know, who's the person that did this? It was supposedly unauthorized. And I've said in our dialogue around here with other members of Congress who do agree with me on this, that the U.S. Department of Agriculture has admitted to committing some $5+ billion in discrimination against black farmers, Hispanic farmers, Native American farmers, and women farmers. Of all of that discrimination, more than $5 billion worth, they haven't found a single perpetrator who has discriminated against any of the farmers in those groups. But yet, they're willingly and actively paying money out of the taxpayers' pockets and handing it out to people that never had to show that they were discriminated against, just attest that they were. And they can't find a single perpetrator out of all of those USDA employees. So my question is, Tom Vilsack, who was it that put up that unauthorized website that advocated for Meatless Mondays? If you can't find that person, I now understand why you can't find all of those people that perpetrated the bigotry that the $5 billion is going out there to pay off. And I'm glad that it came down off of the USDA website, but we know what their culture is. They've been supportive of the child labor laws that have been delivered by the U.S. Department of Labor, even though they've withdrawn those farm labor, farm youth labor regulations. Even though they've withdrawn them, they didn't withdraw them because they changed their mind. They withdrew them because there was a political liability. Same goes with the Meatless Mondays at the USDA. We have a United States Department of Agriculture that thinks that Meatless Mondays are a good idea. They pulled it off the website for political reasons, not policy reasons. If it were policy reasons, they'd tell you who that is and likely fire them. Thanks for bringing it up, Meadows. And now I'd like to go to, and I just remind you what you're watching here. This is our maiden voyage for live stream over the internet. And the questions that I have in my hand are questions that have been sent in by email from people out across the state and the country. I've not read them yet. As I stutter a little bit, you realize that I've not read through them. But I'm taking them on as they come, as spontaneously as if they're from a Townhall meeting. This one is from John and Jeanette. And the question is, the potential increase in the death taxes, the exemption in the rates, would seriously affect Iowa farm families. What is the likelihood that the present death tax laws would be extended? John and Jeanette, I can't tell you now. What I've said is that the extending is some relief from the scheduled increase in death taxes is going to be determined, I believe, in part by the election results in November. And most Republicans are for eliminating or dramatically reducing the death tax. That's not so with Democrats, generally speaking, although there are exceptions on both sides of the aisle. And so if Republicans win the majority in the United States Senate, and if Mitt Romney is the President of the United States, what you'll see is the end of class warfare that's been initiated by the President of the United States. Just dividing people down the lines of what is your income. If you have less wealth, you have more merit than the person that has more wealth. It's okay to be jealous of someone who has wealth, and the president's argument is that if somebody has more money than you have, that somehow poorer people have a claim to wealthier people's money. I think people with income, we've got a progressive income tax. We have the highest corporate tax in the world of any of the industrialized countries. There's a transfer of wealth going on because of the progressive scale in our income tax. But this cultural thing of going after people that have more money than you have is envy. And nothing good comes from envy. But I'm hopeful that we'll be able to put an end to the death tax. We may be able to do that in a lame duck session. I'm hopeful that we can get that done in the lame duck session before December 31st. And so I think there's a follow-up question. I'm going to ask Sarah to step up here in the camera and hand it to me because it must be relevant. And it's this. From Bill in Moorhead, the question is, will we get a farm bill and drought relief? What are you doing to help that relief? Well, Bill, will we get a farm bill? That is a good question. We've been working this thing and leveraging it. Actually, as each day goes by, the intensity gets higher. It's good to have deadlines because it makes us get things done here in this Congress, and otherwise I don't know that we would get things done. But we marked up a farm bill about 3 weeks ago in the Ag Committee, and it started at 10 o'clock on a Wednesday morning, and it finished at 1 o'clock on a Thursday morning. It was 15 hours straight through with the exception of one break for votes, no break for breakfast, lunch, or supper at all. And there's no complaint on my part. I wanted to keep it there because keeping people's feet to the fire gets things done in this town. We passed, I think, a pretty good farm bill out of the Ag Committee, and I voted for it. And I want to see it come to the floor for a debate and a vote as soon as possible. I was optimistic we would get that done within the first few days after it came out of committee. Then my optimism level went down. Now it's coming back up a little bit again. But what's happening here in this Congress is there's debate and negotiations on how we bridge over until September. We've got one more week in session before the August break. And there are some that are proposing that we extend the existing farm bill by 1 year. They'd like to bring that vote to the floor and get it passed. I don't think the votes are there to get that done, and I don't think it's a particularly good idea. If we're going to only provide 1 year of farm bill, then let's pass the version that we passed out of the committee for 1 year. That gets us to conference so that we can sit down over August with the conferees from the House and the Senate. And the odds of me being on that are relatively good, and I'd be engaged in that discussion. I want to get to conference. I want to have this discussion. And yet, the whip check was going on during the last votes today, and we've already had our last votes for the week. I believe that they found out they can't pass that 1 year extension, and so now there will be another plan that will be put together here over the weekend. I'm going to be weighing in on let's move the House committee-passed version of the bill. If we can do that, we don't need to get the Senate to take it up. We can, then we'll have vehicles that allow us to go to conference. Drought relief is one of those proposals. There was a $200 and some million proposal for drought relief to put into this thing to bring it to the floor next week for an extension. I want to see drought relief. I want to see a farm bill that you can this drought hasn't gone as broad or as deep as it's likely to go. It's not going to start raining everywhere. And even if in 1975 I borrowed a little bit of money from a banker that turned out to be a 100% loan on the piece of equipment that I bought. I've lived through this, and our sons are entrepreneurs. Our oldest son owns that company today. But what are we going to do with regulation? Then, back in the late 70s or early 80s, we had 43 agencies that regulated my little construction business. Today, there are a lot more agencies regulating businesses in a lot of different ways. And the weight of, I call it the nanny state, the federal government telling us, giving us permission now to do things rather than having prohibitions. These questions in. These questions that I hold are not questions that I haven't read through them. I'm just picking them up and taking them as if we were on a town hall meeting. And that the questions you ask there, I don't know what they're going to be either. It's better that way. It's spontaneous. And I have, I suppose 10 or so questions left to do in this next 30 minutes. And if you have questions that you want to send in on the email, I'm going to ask them to hand me a sheet with the email address on that so I can read that email address to you over this air. But I'm going to go to the question asked by Merle. And Merle's question is, if Romney becomes president and Republicans take control of the Senate and keep the House of Representatives, what are the chances of reducing the size of the federal government in general and specifically the Departments of Health and Human Services, Energy, and Education? Reducing the size of the federal government in general. First, that's always a hard task. I think the most important thing that we can do with regard to reducing the size of government is, of course, abolish Obamacare, repeal Obamacare. That's number one, and that is doable. And I believe we get that done. Under these conditions, with a Republican majority in the House, in the Senate, and Mitt Romney as the president, we repeal Obamacare 100%, we abolish it. And that will take care of the bite into about 17% of the U.S. economy. Then the next most important thing we can do to reduce the size of the federal government in general, Merle, is to pass a balanced budget amendment out of the House and Senate, send it to the states for ratification, where 38 of them would have to ratify before it would be included into the Constitution. It's a very important endeavor. It's a very difficult endeavor as well. I don't know what the chances of succeeding in that are, but I believe this, that if Mitt Romney does not call for a balanced budget amendment and call for a mandate to pass a balanced budget amendment, then I don't know how we get that done. It's going to take a president of the United States to lead philosophically so the American people can galvanize themselves and get behind a president. I've asked Mitt Romney to do that. He does support a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution. I've not heard enough from him in the last couple of months to convince me that he's calling for a mandate, but I'm going to keep trying. That's in general. And then you said specifically the Departments of Health and Human Services, Energy, and Education. Health and Human Services, most important thing we could do there. Is, and I'm working, and I'll say this, we need to put it all out on the marketplace, get it to compete with each other so that we can keep our energy prices down and get the regulators out of the way so that we can approve these drilling permits and get the EPA out of the way so that they're not managing and rationing the consumption of coal in this country will be another piece. And with education, the federal government puts money into the K through 12 schools. And that's pretty restrictive. And I'm looking at some changes in that I think would be helpful. But Merle, that is a good question, and it's a long answer. And I've been able to at least address parts of it. And now I'd ask anybody that has a question, go to askcongressmanking@gmail.com. It's underlined here, but I don't think that's the case. Ask Congressman King, it's all one word, @gmail.com if you have a question or a comment. And just tell me, Tommy.
We need to pause for a minute to turn up the volume on your microphone.
Okay. I should have done that right away then. Okay. Are you in the camera? I'll hand it out to you over here then. A note would have, I could have done it with a note. The vote fraud, on the other side of this argument, you take someone like Jerry Nadler from New York, who seems to be accepting of voter fraud, put a video up as a component of the testimony today and the hearing before the Judiciary Committee. And that hearing was of a Republican legislator in Pennsylvania that gave a list of the things that we would succeed at if we had a voter ID law in place. And one of them was that Mitt Romney would be elected president of the United States. Congressman Nadler's argument was, well, Republicans know that they're trying to do this in order to manipulate the results of the election. That's why Republicans are for voter ID. No, we are for voter ID because, first, I've said this many times, I would rather lose elections than win elections if it meant that the price was a legitimate election. Legitimate elections are more important even than the Constitution of the United States. A Constitution is the supreme law of the land. It governs the things that we do in Congress and the executive and the judicial branch of government. It is the framework, the foundation for the rule of law, and I revere it. And by the way, I carry one around in my pocket every day that I have a jacket on. I'm not caught without it. This Constitution is important, but I said elections are more important because the Constitution is the foundation for our government. But the foundation of this Constitution rests upon a bedrock, the bedrock of legitimate elections. And the elections themselves, legitimate elections are important and they are essential, but even more essential is the public's perception that elections are legitimate. If Americans believe that their vote is counted when they cast and the legitimate votes are going to elect their officials, they will accept the results of the decisions made in policy by their representatives in this constitutional republic, which, by the way, that's another requirement of this Constitution, to guarantee a Republican form of government. I like that particular passage, you might know. And so legitimate elections are important. What are we doing is part of the question here. Secretaries of State across this land have moved forward in good ways. And I'm thinking of states like Florida, Indiana, Texas, the efforts to require a picture ID. Iowa's Secretary of State, Matt Schultz, has done a great job in driving the issue of a picture ID being necessary in order to vote. I asked Tom Perez, the Assistant Attorney General, assistant to Eric Holder, what did he think when he saw the video of the young man walking in to pick up the ballot that would have been Eric Holder's ballot? Well, he didn't have an answer to that. He wasn't troubled by that. They're not troubled by voter corruption and voter fraud. They're beneficiaries of it, as Jerry Nadler convinced me this morning. But we need to have a legitimate voter elections, and the secretaries of state are helping that. They're trying to purge the lists of duplicates, deceased, and felons. And states that have passed voter ID laws will help a lot. Indiana got a favorable ruling in voter ID, and I believe now that Florida has been provided access to the SAVE list. That's the list that the Department of Homeland Security has, so that they can purge their rolls of those who are not citizens and can't legitimately vote. That door has been opened a little bit. I'm waiting to hear from Iowa Secretary Matt Schultz. I'm willing to help him in any way I can to get him that list so he can clean up the voter registration list. And we'll be communicating with him pretty soon. In fact, the people that manage this in my staff have heard this comment, and they will take action by virtue of listening to what just got said. So thanks very much, Rusty. That's a good question. I'm glad you brought it up. This is Congressman Steve King, and we're on our Ask Congressman King live stream over the internet right now in our maiden voyage. Not too much for glitches. I think it's going okay. But I have these questions. I've not read them, and I just read them as they're fresh to me. This one is from John and Carol. And John, your question is, so this lifelong Republican wants to know, in caps, what you're going to propose for next session to fix this failure of health care access and health care financing in America. As a family doctor in western Iowa, I can tell you how bad what we have is broken and not going to get any better by running backwards. Don't give me platitudes about going back to take each problem and fix them one at a time. By now, you should be able to tell me which ones a Republican Congress will fix and exactly how. I think I know which Dr. John this is. And John, I appreciate your question and the tone with which you deliver it. There's nothing I need to change about what I've provided for answers here. I stand on the same ground that I've stood for over 2.5 years, and that is Obamacare is a bad idea. And I do believe it's unconstitutional, and the litigation of it is not over. John Roberts was pretty creative in declaring those fees to be taxes, even though the president said they were not. And what we have now is the effort to repeal, and I will continue on that ground. I believe that if Mitt Romney is elected president, we will repeal Obamacare. If he's not, it's going to be a very difficult task. But the heart of your question is this, that in the aftermath of the repeal of Obamacare, which is really the only way that we can fix this healthcare system, in my view, what will we do and what can be done? And there are a list of reforms that I've talked about, and I believe that I've answered your question in person just this way. But I'll go through that list again, and these are the things, all of them, that I believe can be done. And there will be a prioritized list. I want them to come one at a time. I don't want them to come as a package. I don't think Republicans should go back and close the doors and cook up a Republican health care overhaul bill to replace the Obamacare legislation that now is law and now has been found, at least in provisionally, to be constitutional by the Supreme Court. And item number one on that list for me would be to provide for selling insurance across state lines. Let people in Iowa buy insurance wherever they want to. Let them have portability to be able to take their insurance policy wherever they want to in America. Those two things are important. Another one that would be a high priority is the full 100% deductibility of everybody's health insurance premiums. And it is unjust to allow a corporate employer to deduct Cadillac premiums when a self-employed person cannot. We need to bring that together. That'll put more people on the insured rolls that are there. Those are the biggest things. I want to expand HSAs so young people can plan for the long term and benefit from it, and have those HSAs become life management accounts so that they can grow and people can make healthcare decisions while they're nurturing a pension fund. If they're able to have a good health experience for a lifetime, they'll be able to roll that money into a pension fund tax-free. Those are the biggest and most important components of this. The pre-existing conditions component can be better dealt with the way Iowa does, with a high-risk pool, and I've been involved in the management of that high-risk pool as the chairman of the Senate State Government Committee. There are something like 38 states that have pools like that, and we can encourage the other states to establish pools like that. So, yes, we can fix this. We can fix this one piece at a time, and I think it was a mistake to take this huge bill and ram it down the throats of the American people. It was not passed with the majority support of the United States Congress. It was legislative shenanigans, and I could take you back through that history, but it's a painful thing to have to relive. But thank you for your question, John. I appreciate that. And I'm watching as Sarah hands me a question that just came in. This is a question from, I guess it's two questions, from Neil. First one from Neil, and we're about 20 minutes left. Is what are we going to do about immigration? I don't blame people for wanting to come here, but the burden is overwhelming. We need to act now. Neil, you know, I want to stop the bleeding at the border. I want to shut off the jobs magnet. I want to force the president to enforce the law. And this litigation that I'm bringing forward that will be filed sometime soon is asking, and it will be asking for a writ of mandamus to command the president to enforce the law. That's a constitutional provision that we can implement. But we know that the president doesn't want to enforce it. He said he will not. And so we need an election is one thing. But other policy changes is this. If we have a commander-in-chief, a president of the United States, that is committed to keeping his oath of office and enforcing the rule of law, then we've got a lot of laws out there that can be far better utilized to solve this immigration problem. I would build a fence, a wall, and a fence on the southern border. And I don't say that we have to build 2,000 miles of it. I just say let's just keep building it until they stop going around the end. If you build another 20 miles and they go around the end of it, build it again and again. The Great Wall of China was built like that. And finally, Emperor Qi Shi Huang plugged that all together about 245 BC, and it became the Great Wall of China. If they can build 5,500 miles of the Great Wall of China and run chariots along the top of that, we can build a little wall down on 2,000 miles of our border in the year 2012 or 13. But I also have a piece of legislation called the New IDEA Act. The New IDEA Act is legislation that brings the IRS into enforcement. It clarifies that wages and benefits are not deductible for income tax purposes, and so employers then would be given safe harbor if they use E-Verify. And that safe harbor would be enough of an incentive for them to check their employees to verify that they can legally work in the United States. Otherwise, if the IRS came in and did an audit, they could deny the wages paid to illegals as a business expense. That would turn your $10 an hour illegal into about a $16 an hour cost for the employer by the time they paid interest and penalty and the income tax on what would be profit otherwise. And that changes the dynamic. You don't need to have a lot of ICE agents out enforcing. You just have to have the threat of the normal audit that comes from the IRS. That's what I do that'd be the most effective. And I agree with you. People come to this country because they want a better life. But I want them also to respect our laws. We have to reestablish the respect for the rule of law in America. That's the job ahead for all of us, reestablish the respect for the rule of law. This is an email that came in before the program started from Carl. And Carl's question is, in order to reduce the annual federal deficit and restore pay-as-you-go federal government growth, what is your solution? Well, I support pay-as-you-go. I support more than that. Let's just roll this spending back to Nancy Pelosi's last budget. That would take us a long ways towards getting towards balance. This has gotten completely out of hand, and I don't think it's unreasonable to go back to 2008 or 2007 levels. Let's do that. And we have a core of solid conservative freshmen that came in here in the last election, 87 freshman Republicans. And some of them have drifted off into the less responsible categories. A lot of them are just looking for leadership and guidance. And by the way, long-term planning and vision, for me, I can have better conversations with some of the members in the United States Senate who are thinking more long-term than I can here in the House. Hopefully there will be a majority in the Senate, and people like Jim DeMint and Mike Lee and Ron Johnson and others can take the lead over there. If that happens, that'll make my job a lot easier here in the House. Now I go to Earl. Earl's question is this: when are we going to put some teeth into eligibility verifications for programs like free and reduced school lunches, Medicaid, and all the rest? Well, Earl, that's been eroded on. It was eroded under the Pelosi Congress when they passed S-chip legislation, which in Iowa we know as Hawkeye. They took the requirements for citizenship verification out of Medicaid eligibility and replaced it with just a requirement that the applicant attest to a 9-digit number, which is supposed to be a legitimate Social Security number. We need to put all of that back in. The free and reduced lunch piece of this thing, this administration has been advertising to expand that. I don't think we need to do that. I want people to stand on their own as much as they can, use government the least amount possible. There used to be a stigma involved, and what I've said also is that we have people that are on their third generation of welfare recipients. Third generation where, well, for example, 36 square blocks in Milwaukee, residential blocks, where there was not a single employed male head of household. It is just so wrong to undermine the culture, to subsidize that kind of living, to not send the message that people have an obligation to contribute to the gross domestic product of the United States. When the president said he calls it the rich, people that make over $250,000 a year, when he wants them to pay their fair share of the taxes, I'm not much on the definition of fair. I say that anybody that's raised 2 or more children knows there's no such thing as fair. But if the president can define fair as increasing taxes on the highest tax categories we have, and I'll say this, the people that are going to get the money from the sweat of somebody else's labor can do their fair share of the work. And that's how we need to reform this welfare program that we have. It needs to go back to workfare. And if we can put all the welfare programs under one committee so that those votes can be seen by everybody in America, and then put work back into welfare, we can give people back their dignity, and we can reduce the entitlement rolls in America. Now I'd go to Martin, and Martin's question sent in by email would be this. Will you vote to continue to vote for the funding of Obamacare until it is repealed? No, Martin. I have said, and I came forward with the amendment that would have cut off all of the funding to Obamacare, and I've taken that stand that I will not fund it. I believe that all of my votes would be consistent with that. It's possible that something crept in on the appropriations cycle, but I think somebody would wave their hand at me if I don't remember what that is. I don't want to vote to extend and fund Obamacare or to implement it, but it's sitting in the room is, and I'm going to give him an accolade because he deserves it, Jason Jaworski, and he is the individual who drilled down into Obamacare, the 2,700 pages of it, and was able to make the case in America that there was deceptively written into Obamacare $105.5 billion, that's billion with a B dollars, in automatic appropriations that was not known to the people that voted on Obamacare. We knew that they were automatic, but somebody had to make that as a fact. And when Jason Jaworski got done with the debate with the Congressional Research Services, they finished second in that debate contest and had to accept Jason Jaworski's numbers. And I tried to take that all out. There was a leadership effort to block my amendment. They succeeded in doing that. And if we had succeeded in bringing this amendment to the floor, it would have passed. And I think we would have not have seen these tens of billions of dollars go into the implementation of Obamacare. I'm going to continue that fight, but I think that we only have ahead of us now one more continuing resolution, which will be pushed on us sometime possibly next week, most likely late September. And after that, I hope to have a majority in the Senate and a president who will agree with us, and we can stop the implementation of Obamacare and then repeal Obamacare completely. I'm moving a little faster now. I'm getting down towards the end of the list, and we have about 11 minutes left. And this is from Omaha, and our neighbor is across the river. And often I find the difference between eastern Nebraska and western Iowa is only the river, unless it's football Saturday. Sometimes we disagree. Mark from Omaha. Question. My parents farmed in Iowa all their lives and retired approximately 15 to 20 years ago, but still own the land. By the way, my father did build his business. He deserves the credit for it, and we agree on that for sure, Mark. They are now in their mid-80s, and I'm not sure how many more years they will have to be able to bless us with their presence. Eventually they will die, and my siblings and I will be facing inheritance and capital gains taxes. What efforts are being made to eliminate inheritance taxes and capital gains taxes? One of the most immediate things we can do to stimulate our economy is to reduce capital gains taxes or eliminate capital gains taxes. There are a lot of Republicans that are supportive of that. We don't have the votes. And as some wise person said as recently as today, actually it was Fred Thompson who spoke at a breakfast this morning. He said sometimes it just comes down to we don't have the votes. A lot of us are working to eliminate the death tax, the inheritance tax, and I certainly support that. I have said many times that inheritance tax or the death tax is a direct tax on the American dream. The American dream is a dream that your parents have lived and are living. to be able to take the farm, and whether they bought it or whether they inherited it, they've kept it, they've maintained it, they've nurtured it. It's an asset, it's a family asset. And we want to give our children more opportunity than we had. That's one of the reasons we work past the age that we may have achieved financial independence, is to be able to build more capital, build more that we can pass along to the next generation. And whether we want to give it, if we're blessed with children, we want to give it to our children almost always, or if we want to give it to a friend, if we want to give it to a charity, we should be able to make that decision. It's the wealth of the people that earned it, in this case, your parents. And there should be no punishment for accumulating wealth, and especially because most of that is after-tax money. The taxes have already been paid on most of that. So we're working at the election results will have a lot to do with it, and the focus that the people across the country have in supporting candidates that support the reduction, and in my case the elimination of the death tax, makes a difference. But I don't think it's predictable until we see the election results. And if we win a majority in the Senate and Mitt Romney's president, then it looks more likely that there will be more relief on the death tax. In fact, I can just guarantee there will be more relief on the death tax with Mitt Romney as president. So thank you, and I wish you well, Mark, and you're a good neighbor across the river with Iowa roots, I might add. Now I'm down to 8 minutes and I think 3 or 4 questions. Linda's question is this. She says, I'm wondering why you're always so quick to put into place any legislation that creates abusive, I'm getting my glasses on for this, wondering why you're always so quick to put into place any legislation that creates abusive situations for animals raised as food. An abused animal is not a healthy animal, so eating meat from that animal cannot possibly be healthy. Look at all the recalls in animal food products this last year. Why are your decisions so against animals? Okay. I'm pretty sure that the Humane Society of the United States has been sending out information. And this is something that has been in front of me for some years. The Humane Society of the United States is not the local animal shelter. They are a $200 million operation whose agenda, I believe, is to take meat off the table of Americans. And they're following a European model, and I believe linked in with the European model. The efforts to regulate the means of production of our livestock are misguided in my view. And to be able to do that state by state, I believe, is unconstitutional for California to regulate the means of production of eggs in, let's just say, Iowa. We're the #1 egg-producing state. I believe that the producers do the best job of taking care of their animals. A healthy animal is a high-producing animal. When I watch our cattlemen and our pork producers, and you don't see as much when it comes to poultry, they take good care of their livestock. They don't want them to be stressed by heat or by cold. They don't want you walking around out there in the feedlot if those calves will even get a little skittish and run over to the corner of the feedlot, because that takes weight off of them. That bit of stress makes there's less gain. Same with hogs. And so all of the livestock producers I know, they want to lower the stress level for their animals, whether it's heat, whether it's cold, whether it's just stress from anxiety. They want them to be happy and complacent with a good appetite. That's true also with poultry. So I think our producers will do a better job. The Humane Society of the United States, led by Wayne Pacelli with a vegetarian agenda, just simply was this. In order to raise more money, they want to be able to say that they have increased the cage size in America, doubled the cage size in America. And what they did was went to the lowest industry standard that was there, multiplied it times 2, and said, this shall be the new standard, and we are going to ram this through. I think it's wrong to allow an outside organization with an anti-meat agenda to control the method and the means of meat production in America, because their goal is to take the meat off of our plate. And so it says, let's see, an abused animal is not a healthy animal. I agree. Eating meat from that animal cannot possibly be healthy. I don't know that. I don't know the answer to that, whether it's healthy or unhealthy. Defining an abused animal probably would determine that, but I want to see healthy animals regardless. I want to see them well treated. I want to see them respected. It says, look at all the recalls in animal food products this last year. We had a problem with salmonella by a very bad actor in Iowa on eggs. That's Jack DeCoster. I have fought him for a long time in the state Senate and then here. I understand that he's no longer managing and in control of those laying operations in Iowa that were the subject of that. That's good. We're going to have safer food because of that. I do know the people that are managing it, and I know that they do a good job. So why are my decisions so against animals? They are not. But what I've said is, this is the attack by the Humane Society of the United States. They have run dishonest ads against me, not recently that I know of, but in previous years. And I expect they'll do so again, although I don't know that it's happened recently. And the decisions are not against animals. It's this, that when there's policy that comes before the United States Congress that elevates an animal above that of a human being, it's wrong to rate animals above human beings. And that's what I have told Wayne Pacelli of the Humane Society of the United States. I will not raise animals up above human beings. For example, if a young girl is pregnant because of, let me say, a sexual predator that's 4 times her age, and he can pick her up at the playground and haul her across the state line to induce an abortion to eradicate the evidence of his crime against this little girl, this teenage girl. If that's legal in this country, but it's illegal to haul an animal across the state line for the purposes of animal fighting, there's something wrong with our priorities. When the legislation that passed in the Farm Bill that says that it's a federal crime to watch animals fight or to induce someone else to watch an animal fight, but it's not a federal crime to induce somebody to watch people fighting, there's something wrong with the priorities of people that think like that. There's something wrong with Wayne Pacelli and the Humane Society of the United States way of thinking like that. And I'm watching, I'm down to 3 minutes, and I have, I think, 3 questions. So I'm going to go quickly here. Sue Ellen, your question is, what is your stand on the UN Weapons Treaty? I oppose it, Sue Ellen. I don't think it's coming at us, but we will block it every way we can. You say here, I read it now, I strongly oppose such an idea and hope you will stand strong against this. I've already promised, Sue Ellen. Thanks for the message. I appreciate it. 2 left in 2 minutes. Gail of Sioux City. Will your future campaign ads tell the public that Vilsack lives in D.C. now and her accomplishments to qualify her for the job are non-existent? I, for one, am sick of hearing what a soulless person you are in her ads. I think they will backfire on her. Well, I believe strongly that I have a soul. I actually believe that Christy Vilsack has a soul. I just don't know what she believes in. And if anybody saw the Iowa Press interview where for 30 minutes she failed to answer a question and believes that that it is ridiculous to talk about people that are in Iowa and across this country aborting little girls just because they're baby girls and they want a boy and they don't want to raise a little girl, that's, I think, is a vacuous situation. And I'd like to hear her answer when her life began. Yours and mine began at the instant of conception. So we will try to get the message out there accurately. Last question in the last minute is from Cliff. And Cliff from Spirit Lake asks this question. What is the status of tax reform? Each year our tax returns become more complex and not everyone pays. Would this not solve a lot of problems by doing away with the IRS and instituting a fair tax or some similar type of tax reform? Why will the legislature not address this matter? Cliff, I have been going for a national sales tax for over 30 years. Before there was a bill, I came to this conclusion. I think that we should take all the tax off of production in America, completely take all of that off, abolish the IRS, put it over on consumption. We'd get a lot more production, we'd be a lot more competitive, it would create tens of thousands, in fact hundreds of thousands, and it would multiply into millions of jobs. It would bring back and repatriate the capital that's in foreign countries that doesn't come back because there's a tax disincentive, a tax liability to it. It'd give people their freedom. People would get 56% more in their paycheck on average. They'd pay less for goods that are on the shelf because it would drive out the embedded federal tax costs that are built within. And all of that, of course, you'd have to put the tax on consumption of goods and services. But there wouldn't be a tax on business inputs. So if a farmer went out and bought a combine, for example, for say $300,000, there would be no sales tax on the combine. If he bought a cap for his head, there would be a sales tax on that. That's for personal use, but we know that farmers don't buy caps, and neither do I. If they build a new house, there would be a tax on sales and the labor and the material. But if he sold that house as a used house the next hour, the next day, or the next year, no tax on that. So this all makes sense to me. It would be pretty difficult to lose the debate on the fair tax. I'm completely for it. I've been an original co-sponsor for a long time. And why doesn't Congress take this up? Political liability, for one. They're afraid. They don't want to take this on because they've been criticized by the other side. Brace up. We will be getting attacks from the Vilsack campaign attacking me for wanting to abolish all of the federal taxes that come on, that are taxed on productivity, and put it over instead on consumption. It does make the world a better place. It does simplify, and it takes a lot of this class envy and class warfare out of the equation. Now I see that maybe I do have another 30 seconds or a minute, because the handy Sarah has handed me the last question from Tracy. And Tracy, your question is, you know what, no one else does though. After all the facts that have been presented, I would like to know why you aren't investigating Obama's ineligibility. Well, Tracy, I looked into that before he was sworn in for the presidency. We went down into the Library of Congress, and we found a microfiche there of two newspapers, only two newspapers in Hawaii. Each of them had published the birth of Barack Obama. I believe his birth date is August 4th. This was published on August 11th, if I'm not mistaken. But in any case, it would have been awfully hard to fraudulently file the birth notice of Barack Obama being born in Hawaii and get that into our public libraries in that microfiche that they keep of all the newspapers published. That doesn't mean that there aren't some other explanations on how they might have announced that by telegram from Kenya. The list goes on. But drilling into that now, even if we could get a definitive answer, and if that turned out to be that Barack Obama was conclusively not born in America, I don't think we could get that case sold between now and November. The most important thing we can do is elect a president who will give his oath of office to uphold the Constitution of the United States, to take care that the laws be faithfully executed, somebody that will be constrained by their oath, and someone who will respect the other two branches of government. That's not Barack Obama, in my view. And so I think that we can't get there on this proposal between now and November. But I think it's important for us to take this subject up the other side of November and make it clear that a candidate for the presidency of the United States would have to certify their birth so that we know where they're born, and the American people need to have access to that, rather than watching Barack Obama spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to try to delay and obstruct the investigations into the circumstances of his birth. And so let me bring this to a conclusion. I thank you all for being online in this experiment. I don't know whether it was successful or not. We'll find out when we hear your comments. If you think it was a good idea, send us an email and let us know. If you think we need to improve something, like turn up the volume in the first half of this program, let us know that too. I think it's a good idea to do this, and I'd like to get to the technology where we can be interactive and you can ask these questions in real time without a 10-second delay. But in the meantime, I'd like to be able to be accessible to all of you, and I'm inclined to continue to do more of these, but please let us know. The way you weigh in will make a difference on what we do. It's part of my job is to listen to you. Thank you very much. I appreciate you all. Signing off for now. We'll see you back in Iowa within hours.